The next speaker we have is David Scarabolliti. David's a operator of the Green Mountain Food Processing Company. They have been operating for 20 years, and in 2006 David's group took over the Kaminya Abattoir, and I think quite a few of us are aware of the construction debacle with the Kaminya Abattoir. David's now operating that abattoir successfully, but like any sector in our industry, there's problems there as well. David, if you could just address us quickly on the processing sector side of the problems and solutions as you see them.
Thanks, John. Ladies and gentlemen, I won't profess to be as good a speaker as the last two speakers. I'm not going to take anywhere near as long. John touched on the debacle of building the Kaminya Abattoir. I think we've been fixing it ever since we took it over. So we're working on that. It's going pretty well. What I'd like to do is just give an overview of the Green Mountain business. It's owned by myself and my brother John, so it's an Australian family company. It was established, the first part of it was established in 1990, and as John said, we bought the Kaminya plant in 2006 and started it off in 2007. We operate at this point in time, it operates on one shift. We process 120,000 head of cattle a year. We've got a capability of 2 shifts, which would take us to 200,000 cattle. Now we're a niche, we could be described as a niche market operation. We specialise in veal and yearling cattle. The average weight of our veal is about 120 kilos, and the yearling cattle we process average around 200. With the product that comes off those bodies, half of it goes into the domestic market and half it goes export. We go to all destinations with the export except EU and Malaysia. We also operate a pastoral business running about 3,000 cattle in northern New South Wales, and we have a transport business attached to our operation, and we have a substantial interest in a major domestic wholesale business that has depots in Sydney, Brisbane and Perth. So we've got I think it'd be fair to say we've got a pretty fair understanding of the whole business from the farm through to getting product to a customer. At the abattoir, at the food we refer to it as the Kaminya Food Processing Facility. We employ 200 people. We have a big focus in the business on satisfying our customers' requirements and producing product which is consistent in quality. Food safety is a big issue, and we've constantly got staff training programs happening. There's three. My topic is described as cost pressures. Now, in the abattouring business, and I think the McDonald family would agree with me on this one, cost pressures are constant. Out in front of us, we have the spectre of rising energy costs, rising costs to comply with EPA requirements, competition from, particularly probably here in Queensland, competition from the mining industry in relation to tradespeople. They're not really the things that I want to talk about. The three cost pressures that I'd like to touch on, and I'll only touch on briefly and leave you with some thoughts, because some of them are relevant to your business too. Anyone who has a workers' comp policy should consider some of these issues. So the three cost issues which I believe the government can be involved in and influence and help the management of workers' compensation, payroll tax, and the cost of the aquis inspections and requirements. Now, Queensland workers' comp is administered individually from state to state in Australia. So I'll just talk about Queensland because that's relevant to our business. It's different in New South Wales. Workers' comp in our business is a major cost. It's probably something that when we took on the abattoir was pretty much underestimated, and is quite a complicated to describe. All the ins and outs of workers' comp and how you got to manage it and control the cost is, you could talk all day on it, and I'm probably not qualified to talk all day on it. But put simply, workers' comp in Queensland operates under two acts. There's the Workplace Health and Safety Act and Regulations, which maps out the responsibilities of owners and managers. So that's anyone who owns a farm is included in that, who employs people. That's the first thing it maps out, and then those acts map out the responsibilities of employees as well. From there, you step on to the so the Workplace Health and Safety Acts and Regulations are the regulator. They're the person who comes on site and says, you're not up to speed, gives you a fine, or gives you a directive to fix something. Then we have what's called the Work Cover Acts and Regulations, which is the insurance company, which is run by, basically by the Queensland government. Now, the Work Cover Queensland has gone from being a very well-run organisation to an organisation which is struggling to have enough money to meet its commitments, from what I understand of it. Now, under the Work Cover Acts and Regulations, the responsibilities that, we'll put simply, the owners and managers' responsibilities are brought forward and apply. But under the work cover, that is insurance companies' mode of operation, the employees' responsibilities do not come across. So I'll put it in a nutshell. Employees do not have any responsibility to help with the management of safety on the plant that's got any teeth. And they operate what's called a no-blame situation, or no-blame policy, and whereby an employee isn't really responsible for their actions. An example of that, without getting into it too far, an example of that is we had an employee who was on workers' comp for 376 days, who then filed a common law claim for a bad back. That person was asked on the employment application 3 or 4 different ways about whether he had a bad back or a previous history. Well, his answers every time were no. He got put in the loadout department, not somewhere where you'd like to be with a sore back. So there's a minefield of issues out there which put a lot of pressure on the cost of workers' comp. Now, the Queensland government needs to look at the legislation and at least make employees as responsible under the Work Cover Acts and Regulations, that's through the insurance company, as they are under the Workplace Health and Safety Act. That's one solution to that problem. So the next, that's about all I've got to say on work cover. Payroll tax, I think is fundamentally wrong. I find it very difficult to take on board that it's fair that to employ your fellow Australians you're taxed. And I'll give a summation at the finish of what I'm saying here in relation to these costs, what it costs per head through our plant last year to manage those two issues, as well as the next one I'm going to talk about. AQUIS is a federal issue. There's some changes happening in AQUIS, and basically what's happening is the full cost of AQUIS is going to be handed back to the plants. Now, as a trade-off, my understanding of it is as a trade-off for that, plants are going to be able to move towards company-employed inspectors under the administration of an AQUIS vet. On the face of it, that sounds, you think, oh yes, that's good, we'll be able to employ those inspectors and we'll get a bit more efficiency out of them. And for some plants, that's probably true. The difficulty for a business like ours, which is on the smaller end of the scale and becoming a rarity in the meat business, I think everyone would agree, is that the big plants will probably be able to drop their inspectors by somewhere in the vicinity of 40%, whereas the small plants may achieve 10 to 15. So that creates an inequity in your cost structure, which is going to put further pressure on smaller niche type operations, which add a fair bit of value to the product right through from the farm gate through to the consumer at the end. I think AQUIS should remain a government responsibility and be administered. I'm not saying they shouldn't make it more efficient. I think they could if they really looked, but I think AQUIS should remain a government responsibility. So just to give you a thought on what those three particular items that I just touched on cost our business per head last year, and included in this figure is, I'll run through what's included in the figure. There's abattoir levies, AQUIS charges, licences, payroll tax, workers' comp. Per head processed last financial year in our business cost us $16.85 a head. I think everyone would agree that if that revenue was left back in the business, we'd have more money to spend on cattle, and we'd have more money to put back into the business to keep reinvesting in the business and grow it into the future. So anyhow, that's all I've got to say. Thanks for listening to me, and I hope that the few figures have been a little bit of value. Thank you.